I opened the camera feed because I missed my daughter. Then the screen came alive and my heart almost stopped. My son-in-law had her pinned to the ground. His mother stood 3 feet away, phone raised, recording every second while tearing her apart. All you've ever been is a burden to this family. They thought I didn't know. They thought an old man 5 states away couldn't reach her in time. But once I found my breath, I made one call. By the time I hung up, their lives were already over. Welcome to Calm Family Revenge. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where are you watching from, your city, your state, your country. I love knowing who's in this room with me. And one quick note, this story contains fictional elements added for storytelling purposes. Any names or places are coincidental, but everything this story teaches you is worth keeping. I have carried people off mountains in the middle of the night. I have pulled strangers from wreckage when the smoke was still rising and nobody else was coming. For 31 years, I was the man they called when every other option had already failed. But nothing, not one moment in all those years, prepared me for a Friday afternoon in October when my phone buzzed against my knee at 33,000 feet, and I made the mistake of looking at the screen. My name is Harold Whitmore. I am 69 years old. I spent the better part of 4 decades as a commander with the National Rescue Service, and when I finally hung up my gear 3 years ago, I thought the hardest days of my life were behind me. I moved back to Cedar Falls, Virginia, a quiet town where neighbors still wave from their driveways, and the autumn leaves turn the whole street into something that belongs on a postcard. I planted tomatoes in the backyard. I fixed the fence that had been leaning since 2018. I told myself this was enough. The only thing that made the quiet house feel like a home was Emily Whitmore Carter. 32 years old. A third-grade teacher at Cedar Falls Elementary who brought her students handmade bookmarks on the first day of school every single year. She had her mother's eyes warm and brown, the kind that crinkled at the corners when she laughed. And she laughed easily, often the way people do when they have not yet been given a reason not to. She was the best thing her mother and I ever did together. And after Margaret passed 3 years ago, Emily was the only family I had left in this world. I was flying home from Margaret's memorial service, a small gathering held each year by the veterans community that had known her when it happened. The seat beside me was empty. I had a cup of coffee that had gone cold somewhere over the Appalachians, and I was doing what I always did on long flights, staring out the window and trying not to think too hard about the house waiting for me with one less light in it. Then my phone buzzed, once, then twice. Then a third time in rapid succession, the pattern I had set for one alert, and one alert only. The security camera at the front of my house. I almost didn't open it. I told myself it was probably a delivery. Maybe the neighbor's cat again setting off the motion sensor for the 4th time that week. I told myself a lot of things in that half second before my thumb moved. I opened the app, the screen filled with the view from my front camera, the driveway, the oak tree on the left, the brick path leading to the porch, and in the middle of it, all my daughter. My chest stopped working. Emily was on the ground. Her hair, the same warm brown as her mother's, was pulled back at an angle that made no sense until I understood that Ryan Carter, her husband, was the one holding it. He had a fistful of it in his hand, and he was dragging her across the concrete while she scrambled to find her footing and couldn't. Her mouth was open. I could not hear her through the muted feed, but I had spent 31 years learning to read the shape of a person's worst moment, and I knew what I was seeing. Standing to the side, calm as someone watching a cooking show, was Gloria Carter, Ryan's mother, a woman of 63 who had sat across from me at Thanksgiving dinners and smiled her careful smile. She had a phone in both hands, held steady, pointed directly at Emily. She was not panicking. She was not trying to stop anything. She was filming and Ashley Carter, Ryan's younger sister, 29. A woman I had watched grow up at family gatherings was pacing back and forth behind Gloria, her mouth moving fast. The camera's audio caught just enough. "Harold Whitmore did this," Ashley shouted, her voice cracking with what I can only describe as performed urgency. "He attacked his own daughter. We all saw it. Get it all on camera." My hand locked around the phone so hard I felt the case flex. I want to be honest about those next few seconds, because people always ask how a man in my position stays calm. The truth is, I did not stay calm. My heart rate spiked the way it does when a rescue goes wrong, and suddenly you are calculating odds in your head that you do not want to calculate. My eyes burned. My throat closed. For exactly 3 seconds, I was not a former rescue commander or a trained professional or any of the things people say about me. I was a father watching his daughter on a cracked phone screen from 33,000 feet in the air, and I could not reach her. 3 seconds. Then something shifted. I have felt it before, that moment when the panic peaks, and then if you are lucky, it tips over into something colder and cleaner and more useful. My breathing slowed on its own. My grip on the phone loosened just enough. I opened my contacts. Noah Bennett had been my closest friend for 40 years. We had worked search and rescue together for 6 of those years before he retired early and went home to Cedar Falls, where he spent his time doing contract work and, more relevantly, maintaining friendships with half the county's law enforcement. Because he was the kind of man people trusted on sight. He was 68 years old, built like a retired linebacker, and he was the only person on earth I would call in this moment without explaining myself first. He picked up on the second ring. "Noah," I said. My voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Harold." His voice shifted immediately the way it used to on the radio when a situation changed grade. "Talk to me. I'm sending you a link right now. It's my home camera feed. Cloud access my credentials only. I'm texting them as we speak." I was already navigating between apps, copying the access link, sending it before the sentence was finished. "Emily is at the house. Ryan is there. Gloria and Ashley are there. They are staging something, Noah. They are recording it, and they are calling her injuries mine." A pause, not hesitation, processing. "How long ago did this start?" Noah asked. "The alert just came through. I don't know how long they've been there." "I'm moving." I heard the sound of a chair pushing back keys being lifted from a surface. "What do you need first?" "Go to the Hendersons next door. The camera system I helped them install 3 months ago covers the full width of my driveway from street level. Pull the full day's footage before anyone thinks to ask about it. Then call Mike Rollins." Mike Rollins was a detective with the Cedar Falls Police Department, 22 years on the job, the kind of officer who had heard every version of every story and could tell within 60 seconds which one was real. Tell him this is not a domestic disturbance call. Tell him to bring a body camera and a second unit and to treat the scene as evidence from the moment he arrives. Done. Noah's voice was already moving, slightly breathless, the background sounds changing as he went from sitting to walking. "What else?" "My daughter's inside that house, Noah." My voice cracked on the last word just once, just barely, and I pressed my fist against my mouth for a moment before I continued. "Get her out before they have time to clean anything up. Everything they are doing is being recorded on my cloud account, and they do not know it. I hear you, brother." His voice dropped to something quieter, and in 40 years of friendship I had learned that this particular tone meant he understood the full weight of what was being asked. "I'm already halfway out the door. One more thing." I pulled up the flight management app on my phone, calculating. The nearest joint airfield with passenger handling was 190 miles off the current route. I need to talk to the flight crew. How far out are you? Far enough that every minute matters. I was already pressing the call button for the flight attendant. Noah, whoever sent that message last night warning me not to come home. Start thinking about who that could be. He went quiet for a beat. Then, you think someone in that house had second thoughts. I think, I said carefully, that not everyone in that driveway wants to be there. The line clicked off. I looked down at my phone one more time at the camera feed still running at the driveway that held everything I had left in this world, and I pressed the attendant call button above my seat. There was still time. There is always still time until there isn't. And I was not done yet. People always ask me when I first understood something was wrong. They expect me to say it was the day I saw the footage, or the night I found the recording. But the truth is quieter than that, and it starts on an ordinary Tuesday morning in April, 6 months before that flight, when I was drinking my second cup of coffee on the front porch and noticed a dark blue sedan parked 2 houses down that had not been there the night before. Cedar Falls is the kind of town where you notice things like that. I did not think much of it the first time. By the third time in 2 weeks, I had written down the license plate number on a notepad I kept in the kitchen drawer. Old habit. 31 years of rescue work teaches you that the details you ignore in the first 10 minutes are usually the ones that matter most by the end. I called Noah that evening. You're going to think I've lost it, I said. Harold. His voice carried the particular patience of a man who had heard me say that exact sentence before and been proven wrong every time. Tell me what you saw. I described the car, the timing, the way it was always gone by noon and back by late afternoon. The fact that it never parked in front of the same house twice, always moving 1 or 2 spots up or down the street, the way someone would, if they were trying not to be obvious, and didn't quite know how. License plate? Noah asked. Already wrote it down. He went quiet for a moment. Not hesitation, just the sound of a man reaching for a pen. Give it to me. Noah Bennett had spent 22 years as a criminal investigator before his knees gave out, and he came home to Cedar Falls. He still had friendships with people who knew how to run a license plate through motor vehicle records. All public information, all entirely legal, the same records any private citizen can access through a licensed lookup service. He called me back the following morning. The vehicle is registered to a company called Langston Development Group, he said. Ever heard of it? I told him I had not. Victor Langston? Noah said. 44 years old, real estate investor. He's got his name on 3 commercial projects downtown and a 4th one in the permitting stage. Clean record, at least on the surface. A pause. Harold, what's his connection to you? That was the question I kept turning over for the next week, because I could not find an answer that made sense. I was a retired rescue commander living in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. I had no business dealings, no property disputes, nothing that would put a real estate developer's car on my street. And yet there it was 3 times a week, reliable as the mail. I hired Daniel Marsh. Daniel was a private investigator based out of Roanoke, 51 years old, former state police. The kind of man who returned calls within the hour and sent his reports in clean, numbered paragraphs. Hiring a private investigator in Virginia is completely legal for any private citizen. Daniel was licensed with the state bonded and had spent 2 decades doing exactly this kind of work. I gave him the license plate number, Victor Langston's name, and one instruction: find out why this man's vehicle keeps appearing on my street. Daniel called me back on a Thursday afternoon 11 days later. His voice was careful in the way that experienced investigators get when they have found something they did not expect. Mr. Whitmore, he said, I think you need to sit down for this one. My chest tightened. I'm sitting. Talk to me, Daniel. Victor Langston and your son-in-law have been meeting regularly. I've got photos of them at a restaurant called Harrington's Private Booth corner of the room, the kind of table you pick when you don't want to be seen. I heard the click of a keyboard. This isn't a recent thing. Based on what I've been able to document, they've been meeting for at least 6 months, probably longer. The coffee mug in my hand had gone cold without my noticing. How close are they? Close enough that Ryan Carter picked up the check every single time, Daniel said. And close enough that the last time they met, they stayed for 2.5 hours. That's not a business lunch, Mr. Whitmore. That's 2 people working something out. I pressed my thumb and forefinger against the bridge of my nose. My pulse was doing something it had not done since active duty, that particular elevated rhythm that is not quite fear and not quite anger, but sits right between the two. I need you to keep watching, I said. Both of them. And Daniel, be careful. I don't know yet what I'm dealing with. Understood. He paused. Sir, is your daughter aware of any of this? The question hit me somewhere I was not prepared for. Emily. My daughter, who taught 3rd grade and made bookmarks for her students, and had married this man 4 years ago at a ceremony where she cried during her own vows because she was so happy she could not help it. No, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. She doesn't know anything yet. Do you want her to? Not yet. I stood up from the kitchen chair and walked to the window overlooking the backyard, the yard where Emily used to play as a child, where Margaret had grown roses along the fence until the year she got sick and couldn't anymore. If I tell her now and she confronts Ryan, he'll know someone's been watching. I need more before I make a move. That's a hard call to make, Daniel said, not unkindly. It's the right one. I said it firmly because I needed to believe it. Keep digging. 3 days later, Daniel sent me a photograph that changed the shape of everything. It showed Victor Langston walking into a downtown office building. Walking beside him, matching his stride, was Gloria Carter, Ryan's mother. She was carrying a leather portfolio under one arm, and she was smiling at something Victor said the easy smile of 2 people who had known each other long enough to skip past the polite part. I called Noah the moment the image came through. Tell me you recognize her, I said, and I described Gloria, the age, the silver-streaked hair, the specific way she carried herself, like someone used to being in charge of whatever room she entered. Send me the photo, Noah said. I heard him exhale sharply when it came through. Harold. His voice had dropped to the register it went to when something was serious. I know that building. That's Langston Development's main office. I know. Why is Ryan Carter's mother walking into Victor Langston's office like she owns the place? That, I said, my hand tightening around the phone, my jaw set against the thing building in my chest, is exactly what I intend to find out. The dread that settled into me that evening was not the sharp kind. It was the slow kind, the kind that comes when a rescue commander looks at a developing situation and starts to understand piece by piece that it is worse than the initial report suggested. I had spent 3 decades running toward emergencies. This one had been building in my own backyard, and I had not seen it until it was already in motion. But I was seeing it now. I had met Gloria Carter exactly 14 times before that photograph changed everything. I counted afterward the way you do when you realize you have been looking at something without actually seeing it. 14 dinners, holidays, birthday parties, and one wedding where she sat in the front row in a cream-colored dress and dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief at precisely the right moment. 14 times I had shaken her hand, passed her the breadbasket, made small talk about the weather and Cedar Falls, and how well Emily looked. 14 times I had noticed that her eyes never quite matched her smile, and I had chalked it up to personality and moved on. I called Noah the morning after Daniel sent the photograph. I want to know everything about Gloria Carter that isn't already in my head, I said. Employment history, business associations, anything that puts her name in the same sentence as Victor Langston before last Tuesday. I'll start with business registration records, Noah said. Business registration filings in Virginia are public documents. Any citizen can access them through the State Corporation Commission's online database, which lists company officers, registered agents, and historical filings going back decades. Give me until this afternoon. He called back at 4:30. Harold. His voice had that careful flatness that meant he was about to say something he would rather not. 15 years ago, a company called Langston Property Ventures filed its initial registration with the state. Listed under company officers, a Gloria M. Carter, serving as Director of Financial Operations. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. She worked for him. For 4 years, Noah said. The company restructured in 2010, and her name disappears from the filings after that. But Harold, 4 years is a long time. Long enough to build the kind of relationship that doesn't go away just because the paperwork does. I walked from the kitchen to the living room and back the way I always do when I am thinking through something I do not want to think through. Margaret used to call it my pacing problem. I called it processing. Ryan was in his early 20s when his mother left that company. I said, working through the timeline out loud. Old enough to know who Victor was. Old enough to have been introduced. That's what I keep coming back to, Noah said. This didn't start 4 years ago when Ryan met Emily. This goes back further. A lot further. I stopped pacing. A cold, specific clarity was settling over me, the same feeling I used to get on a rescue operation, when the scattered details suddenly arranged themselves into a picture, and the picture was worse than the initial report. I need a lawyer, I said. You need the best one you can find. Noah agreed. Sarah Collins had been practicing family law and civil litigation in Cedar Falls for 11 years. She was 38 years old, sharp in the way that people get when they have spent a decade watching other people make expensive mistakes, and she had a reputation in the county courthouse for being the attorney that opposing counsel least wanted to see walk through the door. A colleague had recommended her to me 2 years earlier for an unrelated estate matter, and I had liked her immediately. She was direct, she did not waste words, and she asked better questions than most people gave answers to. I called her office the next morning and told her assistant it was urgent. Sarah met me at her office that same afternoon. She was already on her second cup of coffee when I arrived, a yellow legal pad open in front of her and a pen in her hand, ready. Tell me everything, she said. Don't edit. Don't decide what's relevant. Just talk. So I talked. I laid out everything, the car, Victor Langston, the photographs of Ryan and Victor at Harrington's, Gloria's name in the old business filings, the cold feeling in my chest that had been growing for 3 weeks. Sarah wrote steadily, asked 3 clarifying questions, and did not interrupt once. When I finished, she set her pen down and pressed her fingertips together. Mr. Whitmore, she said, based on what you've described, I want to be straightforward with you. If your instincts are correct, and in my experience, when a former rescue commander with 31 years of field judgment says something is wrong, something is usually wrong, then what you may be looking at is a coordinated effort to position your daughter's marital assets for extraction. That means they need either a divorce settlement in Ryan's favor or a reason to discredit you specifically. My stomach dropped. Discredit me. You're the only obstacle, Sarah said, and her voice was steady, not unkind, just precise. Emily trusts you. If anything goes wrong in that marriage, she comes to you. If they want to move against her assets without interference, they need you out of the picture legally, reputationally, or both. I stared at the legal pad in front of her. My own name was at the top, circled once. Underneath it, a series of arrows connecting the names I had given her. What do I do? My voice came out rougher than I intended, scraped raw by the thing building behind my sternum. You document everything, Sarah said firmly. Every conversation, every observation, every piece of information your investigator brings you. You send yourself dated records, emails, written notes with timestamps because a court will want to see that this was a pattern you observed over time, not a story you assembled after the fact. She leaned forward slightly. And Mr. Whitmore, you do not confront Ryan. You do not tip your hand to Gloria. You let me handle the legal strategy, and you let your investigator keep working. Are we clear? Crystal, I said. She held my gaze for a moment, making sure. Then she picked up her pen again. Good. Now tell me about the house. I told her about the house, the 4-bedroom colonial on Ridgeway Drive that Margaret and I had bought in 1989, that Emily had grown up in, that I had been living in alone since Margaret passed. Sarah listened, made notes, and then asked a question that I had not expected. Is the house currently held in your name alone or jointly with anyone else? My name alone, I said. Margaret's estate was settled 3 years ago. Sarah nodded slowly. Then here is something I want you to think about very seriously, and I want you to think about it before our next meeting. She looked up from the pad. If Ryan Carter's goal is access to assets connected to Emily, and if he believes that your home represents a significant portion of those assets, then putting that property beyond his legal reach before any formal proceedings begin may be one of the most important things you can do right now. I looked at her. You're talking about a trust. I'm talking about a trust, she confirmed. Irrevocable. With Emily as the sole beneficiary. Done correctly and done soon, it would remove the property from the pool of assets anyone could claim through Emily in a divorce proceeding. She paused. But I want to be honest with you, once it's done, it cannot be undone. That's what irrevocable means. You need to be certain. I thought about Margaret, about the last conversation we had had in that house in the kitchen when she was too weak to stand at the counter anymore, and I had brought 2 chairs in so we could sit together while the coffee brewed. She had held my hand across the table and said, Harold, make sure Emily always has somewhere to come home to. I'm certain, I said. That evening, Daniel sent a new report. 2 photographs, time-stamped 40 minutes apart. The first showed Ryan Carter's car parked outside a building I did not recognize. The second showed Ryan and a man I had never seen before walking out together, the stranger in a suit, carrying a leather briefcase, talking with the focused energy of someone delivering information rather than receiving it. Daniel had included a note at the bottom of the report. Subject identified as a family law attorney. Name checked against Virginia State Bar records. Licensed active practice. Specializing in high-asset divorce cases. I read that line 3 times. My hands were steady. My breathing was steady. But somewhere behind my ribs, something cold and heavy had settled into place, the specific weight of a man who has just confirmed that what he feared is real and that the clock has already started. I picked up the phone and called Sarah. They've already hired a divorce attorney, I said when she answered. A beat of quiet. Then her voice came back sharp and clear. Then we move on the trust this week, not next week, this week. Sarah moved on the trust that Thursday. The paperwork took 4 days to prepare and 1 hour to sign. An irrevocable family trust under Virginia law, this is a legal arrangement where the person creating the trust permanently transfers ownership of an asset, in this case my home on Ridgeway Drive, into the trust itself. Once signed, I no longer personally owned the house. The trust owned it with Emily named as the sole beneficiary. The critical consequence of this structure is that in any future divorce proceeding, Ryan Carter could not claim the property as a marital asset because it had never been Emily's to bring into the marriage. It belonged to the trust, and the trust belonged to Emily's future, not to her present circumstances. I signed the documents on a Tuesday morning in May. My hand was steady. My chest was not. "You're doing the right thing," Sarah said across the desk. "I know." I capped the pen and set it down. "That doesn't make it feel less like preparing for something terrible." "It is preparing for something terrible," she said, without softening it. "But you're preparing to win." The day after I signed the trust documents, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow notepad and wrote myself the first in what would become a 6-month chain of dated time-stamped emails. I would write an entry every week, sometimes more often, documenting every observation, every report from Daniel, every detail that felt significant. Then I would email the entries to my own address, creating a digital paper trail with automatic timestamps that no one could later claim I had fabricated after the fact. It sounds simple. In a courtroom, simple and verifiable is everything. Noah came over that same evening. He brought coffee and the kind of expression that meant he had been thinking about something all day and had finally decided to say it. "I want to talk to you about Gloria's house," he said, settling into the chair across from me. I looked at him. "Talk?" "Daniel's been watching her comings and goings for 3 weeks now. She meets with Victor at least twice a month. The meetings are always at his office, which means whatever they're planning, the details are being worked out somewhere we can't reach." He wrapped both hands around his mug. "But her house is different. Ryan goes there. Ashley goes there. Sometimes all 3 of them are there on the same evening. That house is where the operational planning is happening, Harold. I can feel it." "You want to put a recording device inside," I said. "I want to consider it." I pushed back from the table and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, the late spring light going gold across the Hendersons' yard next door. This was the kind of decision that had to be made carefully, because getting it wrong would not just cost me the case, it would hand Ryan and Victor exactly the narrative they were building, that I was the unstable one, the one who crossed lines. "Walk me through how that would work," I said. Legally, Noah had thought this through. "Gloria's central air unit is original to the house. It's at least 15 years old, and it runs loud in warm weather. 3 weeks ago, she called a local HVAC company for a service check. I know the owner. He's been doing maintenance in this neighborhood for 20 years. He paused. "Gloria doesn't know me. She's never seen me in connection with you. We've never been at the same family event, never been introduced. If the HVAC company sends a technician for a follow-up visit, and that technician happens to be a subcontractor they've used before, she invites him in," I said. "She invites him in," Noah confirmed. "He services the unit. He's in the utility room for 40 minutes. The utility room shares a wall with the main sitting room where they hold their meetings." He met my eyes. "Everything is done with the homeowner's consent to enter. The technician is invited inside. The placement would be in the utility room, which is not a private space in the legal sense, it's a service area. Virginia is a one-party consent state for audio recording, meaning that if one person present in a conversation is aware of the recording, it is legal. The challenge is that none of the people in that sitting room would be aware. I turned that over. That puts us in uncertain territory." "It does," Noah said honestly. "Which is why I want you to call Sarah before we decide anything." I called Sarah that night. She listened to Noah's plan in full, asked 4 questions, and then was quiet for a moment. That felt longer than it was. "Here is my assessment," she said finally. Virginia's wiretapping statute is complex, and I won't tell you this is a clean situation because it isn't. What I will tell you is this: if the device is placed in a non-private service area, if Noah enters with the full knowledge and invitation of the homeowner, and if the recordings are used only to inform your legal strategy, rather than submitted directly as evidence, then the risk is manageable. The recordings may not be admissible in court on their own, but they will tell us what we're dealing with, and that information may lead us to evidence that is admissible. A pause. The decision is yours, Harold. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm telling you what the landscape looks like. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, looking at the photograph of Emily on the refrigerator, her first day of teaching, standing in front of her classroom door, in a yellow dress, grinning like the world was the best place she had ever been. Do it, I said. But Noah, if at any point it starts to feel like we're crossing into something I can't defend in front of a judge, we pull back. Agreed. Agreed, Noah said. And I could hear the steadiness in his voice, the voice of a man who had spent 22 years knowing exactly where lines were, and had no interest in stepping over them carelessly. We moved on the Hendersons' camera the same week. Bill Henderson was my neighbor of 12 years, a retired school teacher with a long driveway and a recurring problem with package theft that had been frustrating him since the previous Christmas. I offered to help him install a proper security system, 4 cameras cloud-connected, covering his front yard, his driveway, and the street in both directions. Bill was delighted. The installation took one Saturday afternoon. The footage would record continuously to a cloud account in Bill's name, accessible only by him and with his permission by me, if I ever needed to review anything from the shared street frontage. Bill shook my hand when we were done and said, "Harold, I feel safer already." Good, I said, and I meant it in more ways than one. By the end of June, the system was complete. 3 copies of my home camera data, my private cloud account, a backup server, and a network-attached storage device at Noah's house, which is a dedicated hard drive connected to a home network that saves data automatically and stores it independently of any internet-based service. If someone deleted footage from one source, the other 2 remained untouched. Ryan and his people did not know any of this existed. As far as they were concerned, there was 1 camera above my front door and 1 account they could try to access if they needed to. They were about to find out there was more. Noah called me on a Wednesday evening in early July, and his voice carried something I had not heard from him in a long time. A barely contained energy, the voice of a man who has just found something significant. "The device is in place," he said. "Gloria's HVAC unit got its follow-up service visit today. Everything went exactly as planned." A breath. "Harold, she made them coffee while Noah was in there. She offered him cookies from a tin on the counter. She has no idea." I exhaled slowly. "Good. Now we wait." "There's one more thing," Noah said. "While I was going over Daniel's latest report tonight, I found something I almost missed. 3 weeks ago, Victor Langston filed a new LLC with the state. Standard registration, nothing unusual on the surface." He paused. "The registered agent is a man named James Langston, Victor's first cousin. He's listed his occupation as a notary public and document certification specialist." I frowned. Why would Victor need his cousin acting as a notary? "That," Noah said, and his voice dropped half a register, "is exactly the question I've been sitting with for the last 2 hours." The first recording came through on a Thursday evening in August. Noah called me at 7:15 and said 4 words, "Come over. Bring coffee." I drove to his house on the other side of Cedar Falls with 2 cups from the diner on Maple Street. The kind of coffee that comes in paper cups with cardboard sleeves and tastes like it was brewed by someone who understood that some conversations require something stronger than what a home machine can produce. Noah was waiting on his front steps, and the expression on his face told me everything about the weight of what was inside. "How bad?" I asked, as I handed him his cup. Bad enough that I listened to it twice before I called you," he said. "And the second time wasn't easier than the first." We sat at his kitchen table. He opened his laptop. The audio file was 43 minutes long. I want to be honest about what it felt like to press play on that recording. I have heard a lot of things in my life that I did not want to hear: distress calls, medical reports, the particular silence on a radio channel that means a rescue has not gone the way you needed it to go. But nothing prepared me for the sound of people I had sat across from at holiday dinners discussing the destruction of my daughter's life in the casual planning tone of people organizing a catering order. Victor's voice came first. Smooth, unhurried, the voice of a man who had done this kind of thing before and found it unremarkable. "The timeline needs to move up," Victor said. "I've got a council vote on the marina permits in November. I need the capital freed up before then, which means the filing needs to happen no later than the first week of October." October. Ryan's voice. Flatter than I expected, less certain. "Gloria, that's less than 2 months." "Hi, it's enough time," Gloria said. Her voice was the one I recognized most, that particular mix of authority and reassurance that I had heard her use at family dinners when she was steering a conversation somewhere it needed to go. "We've been over the steps. The petition goes in first. The framing around Harold goes in second. By the time anyone pushes back, the narrative is already established." "Walk me through the framing again," Ryan said. A pause. The sound of something being set on a table, a glass, maybe a mug. "Harold Whitmore," Gloria said, and the sound of my own name in her mouth made my stomach turn over, "is a 69-year-old man with a history of high-stress military-adjacent work. He has lived alone for 3 years since his wife passed. He shows signs of increasing agitation and poor emotional regulation. Emily has confided to you, Ryan, on multiple documented occasions that she finds his behavior troubling and unpredictable." "She's never said that," Ryan said. "She will have said it," Gloria replied, "by the time the documentation is complete." I pressed my fist against my mouth. Noah reached across the table and put his hand on my arm. He did not say anything. He just kept it there steady, the way you hold on to someone when the ground is moving. The petition is for an emergency psychological evaluation, Victor continued. If the evaluation supports the framing, and we have a professional prepared to provide a supportive assessment, then Harold's credibility as a witness to anything Emily might say is significantly diminished. He becomes the story instead of the evidence. "And if Emily pushes back?" Ryan asked. "Emily," Gloria said with a patience that made my skin crawl, "is going to be in no condition to push back." The recording continued. 30 more minutes of logistics timelines, names, the specific language they intended to use in the petition, the sequence of steps that would need to happen in what order. Victor spoke about the property with the detached precision of a man reading a balance sheet. Gloria spoke about Emily the way someone speaks about a variable in an equation. Ryan asked questions and wrote things down and said, "Okay," at the end of each answer in the voice of a man who had agreed to something a long time ago and was only now understanding the full size of it. And then near the end, Ryan said something that I have not forgotten. "What about the house? If Harold contests the trust, he won't have standing to contest anything," Victor said. "That's the beauty of it. Once his credibility is undermined and Emily is positioned as the primary complainant, anything Harold tries to do looks like exactly what will say it is an unstable old man trying to protect an asset he knows he's about to lose. I reached out and stopped the playback. My eyes were burning. My throat had closed to the size of a straw. And then, without warning or permission, I was crying, not the kind of crying that builds slowly, but the kind that arrives all at once, the kind that 31 years of professional composure cannot hold back when it finally decides to come. I pressed both hands over my face, and I cried for my daughter who had trusted a man who spoke about her like a line item. I cried for Margaret, who had loved Emily so completely that the idea of this happening on a world that no longer had her in it was almost more than I could hold. Noah waited. When the worst of it had passed, he slid a box of tissues across the table without comment, which was the most respectful thing anyone could have done. "I'm sorry," I said, pulling myself back. "Don't be." Noah said, his voice rough. "I cried too. The first time." I took a breath. Then another. Then I was Harold Whitmore again, not all the way, not cleanly, but enough. "The psychological evaluation," I said. "They have someone prepared to provide a false assessment, which means we need to get ahead of it." Noah said, "Your medical records. Every checkup, every evaluation, everything going back 10 years. We need Sarah to have all of it before they file anything." Already thought of that. I pulled out my phone and opened a new email to Sarah, typing as I spoke. But there's something else. Victor said they have Emily positioned as the primary complainant. That means they intend to use her. Somehow. Without her knowledge. The documentation Gloria mentioned, Noah said. Ryan is going to claim Emily told him things she never said. Fabricated records, I said. Or coached testimony. I set the phone down. Noah, they mentioned a professional prepared to provide a supportive assessment. A psychologist or psychiatrist willing to sign a false evaluation. I heard it. That's not just unethical. That's a crime. In the United States, providing a deliberately false professional evaluation in a legal proceeding constitutes fraud and potentially perjury, serious federal and state offenses, carrying significant criminal penalties. Whoever that person is, they just put themselves in the middle of a conspiracy. Which means if we find them before they file, Noah said slowly, we have leverage we didn't have this morning. I looked at him across the table. My eyes were still red. My hands had finally stopped shaking. But something had settled in me during those 43 minutes, something that had been uncertain before, and was not uncertain anymore. "Call Daniel," I said. "I want him watching Victor's office for anyone going in or out with a medical or psychology background. Credentials on the door briefcase, anything that looks clinical." I stood up steadier than I had been an hour ago and picked up my coffee. "And Noah, Victor said the filing needs to happen no later than the first week of October. That gives us less than 8 weeks. 8 weeks is enough," Noah said. "We've built cases in less. We have." I moved toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. Ryan asked about the house, about contesting the trust." I looked back at Noah. "They don't know it's already done." Noah's expression shifted just slightly, just enough. "They're planning to steal something that's already gone." "Every step they take from here," I said quietly, "is a step toward a trap they're building for themselves." I thought I understood the full shape of what they were planning. I was wrong. There was another layer underneath, and it was darker than anything I had imagined. I found out on a Wednesday morning in September when Sarah called and asked me to come in as soon as I could. "How urgent?" I asked. "Urgent enough that I canceled my 11 o'clock, she said. When I walked into her office, she was already standing at the window with a folder in her hand, and the expression of someone who has spent the night deciding how to deliver information that cannot be delivered gently. "Sit down, Harold," she said. "I'd rather stand." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. All right. She opened the folder. 3 weeks ago, Daniel flagged an insurance filing connected to Ryan Carter. What we found changes the nature of what we're dealing with. Tell me. Ryan Carter purchased a life insurance policy on Emily 6 weeks ago, Sarah said. The face value is $1.4 million. The number landed in the room like something physical. I felt it in my sternum. That's not unusual on its own, she continued. Spouses take out life insurance on each other, but the beneficiary on this policy is not Ryan Carter. She slid the folder across the desk toward me. The beneficiary is an LLC called Coastal Meridian Holdings. No public-facing business activity incorporated in Delaware 4 months ago. The registered agent is Victor Langston. I looked at the paper and read it 3 times because my brain did not want to accept what it meant. If Emily dies, I said, the money goes to Victor. Directly. Ryan receives nothing. Victor receives everything triggered by Emily's death from any cause within the next 10 years. She held my gaze. Harold, this is no longer a property dispute. This is a financial arrangement that creates a direct monetary incentive for Victor Langston in the event of your daughter's death. My legs were not steady. I sat down in the chair I had said I did not want. Has Emily done a medical checkup recently? My voice came out barely above a whisper. I don't know, Sarah said. But we need to find out very soon. I called Emily that evening. I kept my voice easy and light, the particular performance of a father who is not terrified, who has not spent the day sitting with the knowledge that someone has taken out $1 million policy on his daughter's life. We talked for 40 minutes. She told me about a student who had finally learned to read his name, a recipe with butternut squash, a weekend trip Ryan was planning. She laughed twice, genuinely. When we hung up, I pressed the phone against my chest and stared at the ceiling until the burning in my eyes subsided enough that I could see clearly again. The next morning, Sarah called with the second piece. There's a general power of attorney filed 4 months ago, she said. Under this document, Emily has authorized Ryan to act on her behalf in all financial and property matters. It was notarized and submitted to the county recorder's office. Emily never mentioned this to me, I said. Which is why I want you to ask her directly. Ask what she remembers signing 4 months ago that Ryan described as insurance paperwork. I knew before I dialed. Emily picked up on the 3rd ring. Hey, Dad. Her voice was warm, unhurried. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully. I kept my voice steady through an act of will that cost me more than she could see. About 4 months ago, did Ryan ask you to sign documents at home? He might have described them as insurance paperwork. A pause. Yeah, actually. One morning before school, I was running late and he had a stack of papers, said it was our homeowner's policy renewal. I signed a few things. Another pause, heavier. Why, Dad, why are you asking me that? Did you read them before you signed? The quiet that followed was the kind that holds its breath. I was late, Emily said, her voice dropping into something uncertain and small. Ryan said it was standard stuff. He was right there. I signed where he pointed. A beat. Dad. What did I sign? My jaw was tight. My hand around the phone was shaking. I'm going to find out exactly what it was, and I'm going to explain everything very soon. But right now, I need you to do something. Don't sign anything else Ryan brings home. Don't discuss this with him. Can you do that? You're scaring me. Her voice cracked on the last word. I know, sweetheart. The endearment came out before I could stop it. I need you to trust me a little longer. Can you do that? Yes, she whispered. Yes, Dad. When I called Sarah back, she said exactly what I had already known she would say. The document she signed is almost certainly the power of attorney, Sarah said. Obtained without her informed consent, she believed she was signing insurance paperwork. In Virginia, a power of attorney obtained through misrepresentation is voidable. A court can declare it invalid from the beginning. And the notary, I said. James Langston, Jacquisium. James Langston surrendered his notary commission in Maryland 6 years ago following a fraud complaint. He is not currently licensed in Virginia. He obtained the Virginia commission using a variation of his name that obscured the Maryland record. Every document he has notarized, including this power of attorney, is potentially invalid on its face. I exhaled long and slow. They built their entire plan, I said, on a foundation they never checked. People who are certain they won't get caught. Sarah said, rarely do. A moment passed. Then she said, Harold, do you have any reason to believe that Emily's physical safety is currently at risk? I thought about the insurance policy. Victor Langston's name on the beneficiary line. Gloria's voice on the recording saying Emily would be in no condition to push back. Yes, I said. I do. Then we need to move faster than October, Sarah said. Much faster. There is a particular kind of pain that does not announce itself. It settles in slowly, the way cold settles into a house. When the heat goes out, by the time you fully feel it, it has already been there for hours. That is what those months were like. Sitting across from Emily at Sunday dinners, passing her the salt, asking about her students, watching her laugh, and carrying everything I was carrying without letting a single ounce of it show. I had learned to compartmentalize in my rescue years. You cannot pull someone off a mountain if you are thinking about the last person you could not pull off a mountain. You file it away, you do the job, you process it later in the dark. I had spent 3 decades being good at that. I had never tried to do it with my own daughter sitting 3 feet away from me. The Sunday dinners were Emily's idea, started the year after Margaret passed. Every week without fail, something she had cooked, or the diner on Route 7, or occasionally Ryan at the end of the table making small talk about construction contracts, while Emily refilled everyone's water glass. Those dinners were the best part of my week. They were also, during those months, the hardest thing I did. I remember a Sunday in June, before the recording, before Sarah's call about the insurance policy, but after I had already seen the photograph of Gloria at Victor's office and felt the first cold understanding of what was being built around my daughter. Emily came over with chicken soup because the weather had turned gray, and gray weather required chicken soup, which was something Margaret used to say. She set the pot on the stove, turned around, and looked at me with her mother's eyes. You seem tired, Dad. Are you sleeping okay? My chest clenched so hard I had to turn away to get bowls from the cabinet just to have something to do with my hands. I'm sleeping fine, I said. Just the usual old man stuff. That's not old. That's experienced. She bumped my shoulder the way she had done since she was a teenager, and I felt the contact like a verdict, the warmth of it, the complete trust in that small gesture that I was protecting with everything I had and could not tell her about. We sat and she talked. A parent-teacher conference gone sideways. A book she was reading. How Ryan had been distracted lately, working late, coming home without explanation, sometimes not coming home until she was already asleep. Does that bother you? I asked. The late nights. She wrapped both hands around her soup bowl. Sometimes. But he gets like this when a project is in a tough phase. I've learned not to push. She looked up. Is that bad? That I've learned not to push? The words were right there. They had been pressing against the back of my teeth for weeks. Emily, the man you married, is not who you think he is, and you are not safe, and I am doing everything I can. Instead, I said, "It's not bad. It's just something worth paying attention to." She nodded, then smiled that small, private smile so much like Margaret's that my eyes went hot, and changed the subject to a student named Marcus, who had finally stopped hiding under his desk during fire drills. I talked about Marcus. I laughed in the right places. I ate my soup. When she left, and I watched her taillights disappear around the corner, I sat on the front steps and pressed my hands over my face and let myself fall apart for exactly 4 minutes. Because that was all I could afford. 2 years before any of this, Emily had called on a Tuesday evening, sounding uncertain, in a way that was not like her. She had found messages on Ryan's phone, not snooping. His phone had lit up on the counter, and the tone was not business. It didn't feel like business. "Should I say something to him?" she asked. I thought for 10 seconds. Then I said the thing I have replayed 100 times since. "Don't say anything yet. Watch and wait. If it's something, it'll show itself." She followed my advice. She waited. And what I did not know then, what I had to live with every day for 2 years, was that my rescue-trained instinct to observe before acting had left my daughter in that house with that man for longer than she should have been. Noah said once, late at night after another batch of Daniel's reports, "You can't blame yourself for being careful." "I know," I said, "but you do anyway." I did not answer. We both knew the answer. The night Emily called, frightened the night I told her not to sign anything else, and heard her whisper yes with a cracked voice. I went afterward and stood before the photograph on the dresser. Margaret and Emily at the college graduation. Margaret in the green dress she had bought specifically for that day. Emily in her cap and gown, both of them laughing at something that had happened just before the shutter clicked. I picked up the frame. My hands were not steady. "I'm trying, Margaret," I said out loud to the woman in the green dress, to the empty room, to whatever part of her might still be listening. "I need Emily to hold on a little longer, and I can't tell her to hold on because I can't tell her anything yet." I set the frame back down. Then Emily called right then, as if she had heard something through the glass of the photograph that I could not hear. "Dad," she said, her voice smaller than before. "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart." She was telling me it's going to be okay. She was not asking for a promise. She was asking for the specific reassurance that comes from a voice you have trusted your entire life. My throat ached. I pressed the phone hard against my ear. "It is going to be okay, Emily. I promise you. What I need from you right now is 1 more week. Can you give me 1 more week?" A long breath. Then quietly, "Okay, Dad. 1 more week." When I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and understood something I had been refusing to understand for months. I was out of time. Before I tell you about the night the message came, I need to take you back 3 years. Because the thing that ultimately saved everything did not happen in October. It did not happen in August when I heard the recording, or in May when Sarah drew up the trust papers. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the spring of 2023 in the kitchen of the house on Ridgeway Drive, 6 weeks after we buried Margaret. Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore died on a Wednesday in March, after 14 months of fighting something that did not want to be fought. She was 66 years old, and she faced the last year of her life the same way she had faced everything else, with a particular combination of stubbornness and grace I have never seen in anyone else, and do not expect to again. She kept her sense of humor until the very end. She made me promise to water the roses. She told Emily in one of their last long conversations that the most important thing a person can do is make sure the people they love have somewhere soft to land. 6 weeks after the funeral, I sat down with Robert Haynes, my estate attorney of 20 years, a quiet man from Charlottesville, who wore bow ties and spoke in complete sentences, and we went through Margaret's estate, then mine. "The house," Robert said, setting his glasses on the table. "What do you want to do with it?" "I want to put it in a trust," I said. "Irrevocable. Emily as the sole beneficiary." He nodded slowly. "Any specific conditions?" I thought about Emily, about Ryan, about the way I had watched him at the wedding, the handshake too, practiced the smile arriving just slightly late, the way he had looked at our house, with an expression I had filed away without knowing why. I could not name what I felt about Ryan Carter then. I only knew I had spent 31 years learning to read the difference between what people showed and what they were, and something about him did not add up. "One condition," I said. "If Emily ever marries someone who is subsequently convicted of a felony, the trust transfers to the National Rescue Foundation. Emily keeps lifetime residency, but no one could ever claim the property through her in a legal proceeding." Robert looked at me over his glasses. "That is an unusual condition." "I've seen what happens when people use the people they're supposed to love as leverage," I said. "I don't want that to be possible here." He wrote it down. The papers were signed the following week. I did not tell Emily, not because I was hiding it from her, but because I did not want to plant a seed of suspicion before her marriage had a chance to be wrong. If Ryan was a good man, the condition would never matter. 3 years later, sitting on the edge of my bed on a Thursday night in October with a half-packed suitcase on the floor and a flight to Richmond leaving at 7 the next morning, I thought about that Tuesday afternoon more than I had thought about it in years. My phone buzzed at 11:47. Unknown number. Virginia area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I read the message. "Don't come home tomorrow." 5 words. No punctuation, no explanation, no signature. I called Noah. He picked up on the first ring, which told me he hadn't been asleep either. "I just received a message from an unknown number," I said. 5 words. "Don't come home tomorrow. Virginia area code, prepaid phone, most likely." I kept my voice level. "Who in that group knows my cell number?" "Ryan has it. Gloria probably. Ashley, she was at enough of those dinners." "Ryan and Gloria don't warn me," I said. "They need me on that plane." "Ashley," Noah said quietly. That's where I land too." She knew enough to be worried. She knew enough to find a prepaid phone. But she didn't have enough time to tell me more than 5 words. "What do you want to do?" I looked at the suitcase. I looked at Margaret's photograph on the dresser. Then I looked at the window, at the dark street, at the small red light blinking on the corner of my roofline that told me the camera was running and backing up and doing exactly what I had built it to do. "I'm getting on that plane," I said. "Harold. If I cancel, they postpone. They find another day when I'm not here, and maybe next time there's no warning. But if I go and if they move tomorrow, everything they do goes onto that camera and into that cloud account, and there is not a single thing they can do to get it back." Noah was quiet in the way I had learned to read over 40 years, thinking, not dismissing. "You're using yourself as bait," he said. "I'm using their confidence against them. There's a difference." I paused. "I need you to check all 3 backup systems tonight. Confirm the Henderson footage is running clean. Have Mike Rollins' number open on your phone. If they move tomorrow, I'll call you from the air. The moment that call comes in, I need you moving within 60 seconds. "I'll be ready," he said, and the steadiness in his voice was the same steadiness I had relied on for 4 decades. "One more thing. The person who sent that message, she took a real risk. Whatever happens tomorrow, I don't want her to get lost in the fallout." "We'll figure that out when we get there," Noah said. I finished packing in the dark, with the window open and October air coming in cold and clean. I zipped the suitcase. I checked the camera feed one final time, everything green, all three sources running clean. Then I went to bed. I did not sleep, but I lay still and breathed evenly and thought about a 69-year-old man who had spent his career arriving in time. Tomorrow, I told myself, you will arrive in time again. The flight left at 7:04. I was in seat 14A watching Cedar Falls disappear into the morning clouds when I finally closed my eyes for 20 minutes. Not sleep, just the stillness you allow yourself before the hard part begins. I did not know yet that the hard part had already started. 40 miles behind me on Ridgeway Drive, Ryan Carter's car had been parked around the corner since before dawn. Before I tell you what happened the night before that flight, comment SHIELD if you think Harold was right to protect Emily in silence. Comment truth if he should have told her sooner. A note: this story contains fictional elements for storytelling purposes. Names and places are coincidental, but the lesson inside is worth your time. 4:17 in the morning. That was the time on the clock when I finally gave up on sleep and got out of bed. The coffee maker had started its cycle at 4. Margaret had bought it in 2019 because she said I had no business operating machinery before 6 a.m. And the kitchen smelled like the beginning of something when I came downstairs in the dark. I poured a cup and stood at the counter and looked out at the backyard. The rose bushes along the back fence had finished their last bloom 2 weeks earlier. Margaret had planted them the second summer we lived in the house, 11 rose bushes in 3 colors, because she said a yard without roses was a yard that wasn't trying hard enough. I had watered them every week since she passed. Not because I cared about roses, because she had asked me to, and keeping that promise was the closest thing I had to a conversation with her anymore. Today's the day, I said to the window, to the roses, to whoever was listening. I carried my cup to the living room and sat in Margaret's armchair, the one with the faded armrests I had refused to reupholster because the fading was hers, and opened my phone. All camera feeds running. The front unit above the door, the secondary wide angle mounted under the eave, and painted the exact color of the trim and the Henderson footage next door. Green indicators across the board. All 3 backup systems confirmed my private cloud account, the secondary server through a data hosting service, and the NAS drive at Noah's house across town. I opened my email and wrote to Sarah, "It's the morning of the flight. All systems running and backed up. The August recording is secured in all 3 locations. Trust documents are with Robert Haynes. If they move while I'm in the air, everything they do will be captured and stored beyond their reach. Noah contacts Mike Rollins the moment anything triggers. I wanted you to have this in writing before I board. HW, sent at 4:22. The timestamp would matter later." Everything I did that morning was done with the awareness that timestamps were a language a courtroom could read. Sarah replied almost immediately. Already awake, which told me she had been expecting this. Received. Phone on all day. Go be with Margaret. We've built what we needed to build. SC. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the armrest and let myself sit in the quiet for a few minutes without doing anything at all. I thought about the first time I had walked through the front door of this house. September 1989. Margaret had stood in the empty living room with her arms out and turned a slow circle and said, "Harold, this is where everything good is going to happen." She had been right, almost embarrassingly right, the way she usually was about things that mattered. I thought about Emily at 7 years old falling asleep on the couch during a thunderstorm because she said she wasn't scared, but clearly was, and Margaret covering her with the blue blanket and whispering something that made her smile in her sleep. I thought about Ryan Carter parked somewhere on a Cedar Falls street at this exact moment, waiting for my taillights to disappear. Then I stopped thinking and went to get dressed. At 5:45, I came back downstairs with my jacket on and stood in front of the hallway mirror the way I had stood in front of 100 briefing room mirrors over 31 years, 69 years old. Gray at the temples, deeper lines than I remembered. Eyes that were tired but clear. "You know what you're doing," I said to him. "You've known since May." He did not look convinced. I went with him anyway. The last thing I did before opening the front door was stop at the framed photograph on the hallway table, Margaret and Emily at Emily's 30th birthday dinner. Margaret in the blue blouse she had loved, laughing at something Emily had just said. Her hand reaching out mid-laugh, caught by the camera in that half-second of pure, unguarded joy. I put my hand flat against the glass. "I'm going to bring her home, Margaret," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word in a way I did not try to stop. "Whatever it takes, I'm going to bring her home." I picked up my suitcase and opened the front door. The October morning was cold and clean, the sky just beginning to lighten from black to the deep blue that comes before gray. The street was empty. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking at something it did not like. I locked the door. I walked to the car. Before getting in, I turned back and looked at the house one more time. The front camera pulsed its small red indicator light in the dark. The secondary camera sat invisible under the eave, watching the full width of the driveway from an angle Ryan Carter did not know existed. I thought about what Noah had said. "You're using yourself as bait." I thought about what I had said back. "I'm using their confidence against them." The difference mattered. It had always mattered in 31 years of operations, where the line between a calculated risk and a reckless one was the difference between bringing someone home and writing a letter to their family. You did not take risks for the sake of risk. You took them because the alternative was worse, and because you had prepared well enough that the odds were in your favor. I had prepared. The backups were running. Noah was ready. Sarah was awake. I got in the car and drove to the airport without looking back. I was in seat 14A by 6:45, watching the ground crew move in the amber runway lights below. Phone on airplane mode. Airport coffee going cold. Hands in my lap, perfectly still. When the wheels lifted off the runway, I opened my eyes. Somewhere below me on a quiet Cedar Falls street, Ryan Carter's car was moving. People want to know what goes through a man's mind when he opens a phone screen at 33,000 feet and sees the thing he has been dreading for 6 months. They expect rage or panic or the helplessness of distance. What I felt was worse than any of those things, and also, in a strange way, cleaner. The alert came through at 2:14 in the afternoon. I had been in the air for 6 hours, returning from Margaret's memorial in Richmond, a small gathering in a church hall, folding chairs and bad coffee, and people who had genuinely loved her, which was more than enough. I was tired in the way grief makes you tired, a heaviness behind the eyes that has nothing to do with sleep. My phone buzzed against my knee. Security alert motion detected front entrance. I almost did not look. I told myself it was the Henderson's cat, a delivery driver. I told myself all the things a person tells themselves when they want one more minute before the world changes. Then I looked. The camera feed filled my screen in hard afternoon light. For 3 seconds, I counted them afterward the way you count things that matter. I was simply a father looking at his daughter. Emily was on the ground near the edge of the driveway. Her hands braced wrong, moving in that desperate scramble that meant something was terribly wrong. Ryan stood over her, the posture of a man who was not afraid of being seen. Gloria was 6 feet to his left, phone raised steady as someone recording a performance. Ashley paced behind them, her mouth moving fast, her arms gesturing in the exaggerated way of someone performing for an invisible audience. I could not hear Emily. The feed was muted. But I have spent 31 years reading bodies, and what I read in those 3 seconds was a language I understood completely and wished I did not. Then the panic peaked, went as high as it was going to go, and instead of continuing upward, it tipped. The way a wave tips at its highest point and becomes something else entirely. My heart rate began to come down. My breathing lengthened. My hands loosened on the phone. I was not calm. Calm is the wrong word. I was operational. There is a difference. Calm is the absence of feeling. Operational is feeling everything and moving anyway, because the person on the ground cannot afford to wait for you to finish feeling. Emily was on the ground. I was the person coming. I pressed the call button. The flight attendant, Brianna, whose name I had noticed on her badge 3 hours earlier, appeared at my row. I kept my voice low and even. I need to speak with the captain. Family emergency, time sensitive. She looked at my face and did not ask questions. Captain Gerald Forsyth came back to my row 4 minutes later. 50s unhurried, the manner of a man who had seen most categories of in-flight emergency. I showed him the feed, told him what I was looking at in the fewest words possible. I'm a former commander with the National Rescue Service. My daughter is at my home in Cedar Falls, Virginia. She is in danger. There is a joint military airfield approximately 200 nautical miles from our current position. I'm asking you to consider an emergency diversion. Forsyth studied the screen. Then, what's your contact situation on the ground? A former law enforcement officer already moving to the address. A county detective being notified as we speak. He nodded once. Give me 5 minutes. He came back in 3. We're diverting. Wheels down in approximately 90 minutes. I called Noah the moment Forsyth walked forward. The earlier call had set the immediate response in motion, but there was one more piece, one sitting in Daniel's report filed 48 hours earlier. Diversion confirmed, I said. 90 minutes. What's your status? Moving, Noah said, his voice carrying the sounds of a man already heading somewhere fast. Henderson footage pulled. Calling Rollins now. Daniel is... A brief pause. Harold, Daniel has been at the airport for 2 hours. I know, I said. You staged him there in advance. 3 weeks ago, Daniel flagged Victor's assistant, booking a one-way flight to Toronto. Departure date today. I told Daniel to be at Dulles at noon, regardless of what happened at the house, because if we were right about everything, Victor was going to run the moment things started moving. I looked out at the unbroken cloud cover below. Victor doesn't know Daniel's face. He's been standing near gate C-17 for 2 hours with a description and photographs. Noah exhaled, not quite disbelief, not quite admiration. You planned for him to run. I planned for everything I could think of. That's what the last 6 months were. And the things you couldn't think of. I thought about Jake Hernandez and his drone. About Gloria's Google Photos backup she didn't know was running. About Ashley standing in that driveway pacing. Those, I said, tend to work themselves out when the foundation is solid. The plane banked into its diversion heading. Noah said, whoever sent that message last night, she's still in that driveway. She's still part of what's happening. I know. My throat ached with something that lived in the same neighborhood as grief. When Emily is safe and Rollins has what he needs, I want to understand why she made both choices. The one last night and the one today. The one last night was conscience, Noah said. The one today is fear. Most people, I said, are both things at once. The plane descended through the cloud layer. Virginia appeared below gold and brown in the October light patchwork fields and dark tree lines peaceful from the air regardless of what was happening on the ground. 90 minutes. I had told Emily one more week. I was going to make it one more afternoon. Here is what I know about that Friday afternoon, not from what I saw on the phone screen, but from what 7 cameras, one 11-year-old boy and a woman who finally told the truth assembled for me afterward. I want to be clear about this, because the way I tell this part matters. I was not there. What I am about to describe is a reconstruction built from footage from testimony from lab reports and traffic camera records and the drone footage that a child captured without understanding what he was capturing. I have gone over it so many times that it feels like memory. It is not. It is evidence. And evidence, when it is complete enough, tells a story more reliably than memory ever could. Ryan Carter's car appeared on the traffic camera at the corner of Ridgeway Drive and Maple at 6:17 in the morning. Traffic cameras in Cedar Falls are operated by the city's Department of Public Works and record continuously as part of the municipal traffic management system. The footage is stored for 30 days and is accessible to law enforcement through standard records requests. When Noah pulled the footage 2 days later, the timestamp was clear and unambiguous. Ryan's silver Tahoe license plate visible turning onto Ridgeway Drive at 6:17 a.m., 8 hours before he would tell police he had arrived. He parked around the corner and waited. Emily inside the house made coffee at 7 and drank it at the kitchen table the way she did every morning before school. She did not have school that day, a teacher in service day, but habit is habit. Ryan came through the front door at 7:45 with a pharmacy bag and a smile and told her he had stopped for her favorite creamer. He set it on the counter. He made her a fresh cup. What Emily did not know, what none of us knew until Dr. Megan Foster ran a blood panel at Cedar Falls General that evening, was that the creamer had been prepared the night before. I will not describe what was in it. What matters is what it did. By 10 in the morning, Emily was having difficulty concentrating. By noon, she was unsteady on her feet. She told Ryan she felt strange. He told her she was probably getting a cold and suggested she rest on the couch. She rested on the couch. Gloria arrived at 1:15. Ashley arrived 20 minutes later. They came in through the side gate, the gate whose code Ryan had given them, and they stood in the kitchen for 40 minutes, while Emily drifted in and out of an uneasy half-sleep in the next room. At 2:05, Ryan went to the living room and told Emily he needed her to come outside for a minute. He said there was something wrong with the gutters, and he needed her to look at it with him. Emily, who was not fully herself, stood up and went with him, because that is the kind of person she is. She trusts. She helps. She has always been that way. What happened in the driveway I will not describe directly. The cameras describe it. The drone describes it. What I will tell you is this: Gloria stood to the side and filmed with both hands steady. Ashley paced behind her with a piece of paper, a handwritten script, as it turned out 3 lines of dialogue that drone footage later captured at high magnification when Jake Hernandez flew his camera directly overhead and shouted the lines with the committed energy of someone who had rehearsed them. Jake Hernandez was 11 years old, the son of Carmen and Luis Hernandez, who lived 4 houses down on Ridgeway Drive. He was a serious, quiet boy who had been saving his birthday money for 8 months to buy a mid-range consumer drone, the kind with a 12-megapixel camera and a 30-minute battery life. And that Friday afternoon, he was in his backyard running his first real test flight. He guided the drone up to 60 feet. He panned the camera down the street the way the tutorial videos had shown him. And the thing he saw through the live feed on his tablet screen made him bring the drone back down, immediately run inside, and stand in the kitchen shaking while he tried to explain to his mother Carmen what he had just recorded. Carmen Hernandez called Noah Bennett's number because Noah's number was on a community bulletin board that Harold had helped organize 2 years earlier under the heading Neighborhood Safety Contacts. She did not know Noah was already in motion. She did not know any of what was happening. She only knew that her son was shaking and that the footage on his tablet showed something that should not be on anyone's screen. Noah told her to stay home, keep Jake calm, and do not let anyone delete anything from that tablet. What Jake had captured was not just the scene in the driveway. The drone had been directly overhead when Gloria looked down at her paper and looked back up, and at 12 megapixels from 60 feet, the footage was clear enough that when Sarah's office enhanced the image 3 days later, 3 words on the top line of that paper were legible. 3 words that matched word for word the dialogue Ashley had been shouting at the top of her voice. It was not a family dispute. It was not a moment of anger or loss of control. It was a production. It had stage directions. And it was running out of time because 2 county vehicles had just turned onto Ridgeway Drive without their lights on. Noah Bennett had spent 22 years as a criminal investigator, and the one thing those years had taught him was that guilty people talk too much. He pulled his truck to the curb 2 houses down and watched Mike Rollins park the first county vehicle behind him, a second unit pulling in 30 seconds later. 4 officers total. Rollins in the lead body camera already running clipped to his chest, recording continuously from the moment he left his vehicle. They walked up the lawn without hurry. The deliberate pace of law enforcement that knows it, holds the better hand, and does not need to show it. Gloria Carter opened the front door before they reached the porch. She had the smile ready, the most prepared smile Noah had ever seen on someone about to have the worst afternoon of her life. Precise, warm, calibrated to exactly the right wattage of concerned but cooperative. "Officers, thank goodness," she said, her voice carrying the music of a woman who had hosted charity luncheons and knew how to fill a room. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Harold Emily's father, he's been under so much stress since his wife passed. Today things just frightened us. We only want what's best for Emily." Rollins let her talk. His method, as he had once explained to Noah over coffee, you let them build the story. The longer they talk, the more specific they get. The more specific they get, the more places the story can break. Gloria talked for 90 seconds. She mentioned Harold's grief, his isolation, his unpredictability. She used the word documenting. "We've been documenting his behavior for weeks, officer. We have it all on video," while Rollins's body camera recorded every syllable. Then Rollins said pleasantly, "Ma'am, I'd like to see Emily." Gloria's smile held, but something shifted behind it. "Of course. She's resting inside." "I'd like to see her now," Rollins said. Same tone, same pleasantness. No room for negotiation inside it. Noah had gone around the side of the house. He saw the small shape detach from the shadow of the gate before anyone else did. Emily, still unsteady, her hair marked from what had happened in the driveway, moving toward the sound of voices she did not recognize, but trusted more than the ones inside. "She's at the gate," Noah called out. He crossed the yard in 8 strides and caught her by both arms as her knees started to give. Gently, carefully, "Easy," he said. "I've got you. My name is Noah. I'm Harold's friend. Your dad called me. He's on his way home right now." Emily looked up at him. Her eyes were glassy, her coordination wrong in the specific way Dr. Foster would later identify as consistent with sedative exposure. But when she heard Harold's name, something came back online. Her jaw set. Her grip on Noah's arm tightened. "Is he okay?" she asked, her voice rough. "My dad, is he okay?" Noah felt his chest tighten at that. She had just been through the worst afternoon of her adult life, and the first question out of her mouth was about Harold. "He's fine," Noah said. He's going to be so glad to see you. But right now, I need you to come with me. Let the paramedics check you out. I don't need Emily. He looked at her directly. For Harold. She went with him. Inside. Ashley Carter had not moved from the kitchen doorway since Rollins arrived. She stood with her arms crossed, eyes tracking everything: Gloria's performance at the door, the window through which she could see Noah walking Emily toward the county vehicle. Her face was doing something complicated. Rollins noticed it because Rollins noticed everything. He asked Gloria 3 more questions, each one a small specific detail about the timeline each designed to get her more committed to the version of events she had chosen. Gloria answered with increasing confidence, adding color, building the architecture of a story that grew more elaborate by the minute. Then Rollins turned to Ashley. Ms. Carter, can you walk me through what you saw this afternoon? Ashley opened her mouth. And then something happened that Gloria had not planned for and could not stop. Ashley looked at the window. She looked at Emily sitting in the back of the county vehicle, wrapped in a blanket, face turned away. Ashley's jaw worked. Her eyes went bright and wet. It happened the way Gloria said. It was the flattest sentence Noah had ever heard come out of a human mouth. It sounded exactly like a person reading a line they had memorized in a language they did not fully speak. Rollins wrote something in his notebook and did not press. Not yet. 2 days later, a search warrant was issued for Gloria's phone. A forensic technician discovered she had deleted 47 video files on the afternoon of the incident. What Gloria did not know was that 6 months earlier, when Ashley had helped her transfer to a new Android phone, the backup settings had been configured to automatically upload every photo and video to Gloria's Google account within minutes of capture. The phone deletions removed the local copies. The cloud copies were entirely unaffected. The warrant was extended to cover the Google account. Every deleted file was recovered intact, with original timestamps. 47 videos. The longest was 11 minutes and 22 seconds. In it, Gloria's voice was clear and steady and calm, the voice of a woman who had no idea she was standing inside a machine that was already running against her. Noah called me while I was still in the air. Harold, he said, and his voice carried something I had not heard in it since the day we pulled a family of 4 from a collapsed structure in 2003, and everyone was breathing. We have everything. Emily is with the paramedics, and she is going to be okay. My throat closed entirely for a moment. I pressed my fist against my mouth and breathed through my nose until I could speak. Is she scared? I asked. She asked about you first, Noah said. First thing out of her mouth, something broke open in my chest, not painfully. The way something breaks open when it has been held too tightly for too long and finally gets to release. Tell her I'm coming, I said. Tell her I'm already on my way. Noah was waiting at the bottom of the arrival ramp when I came through the doors. He did not say anything. He put his hand on my shoulder for one brief second, the grip of a man who has known you long enough to understand that some moments do not need words, and then he turned and walked toward the truck, and I followed him. We had been driving 4 minutes before either of us spoke. Emily is stable, Noah said, eyes on the road. Dr. Foster has her in a private room. They ran a full blood panel when she came in, standard procedure when a patient presents with the kind of disorientation Emily was showing. The panel came back with traces of a benzodiazepine, a sedative that requires a prescription and does not appear in someone's bloodstream without being deliberately administered. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm and held it there. How much? I asked. Enough to significantly impair her coordination and judgment for several hours. Not enough to cause serious physical harm. Dr. Foster believes it was calculated the dosage was designed to make Emily compliant and unsteady, without producing symptoms severe enough to require emergency intervention on its own. He paused. Whoever prepared it knew what they were doing and had access to the medication in advance. The truck moved through Cedar Falls in the October afternoon light. The leaves were at peak color gold and red, and the deep burnt orange that Margaret had always called the best week of the year. I looked out the window and thought about how ordinary the world looked from the outside when something terrible was happening inside it. Rawlins, I said, already has the blood panel results. Dr. Foster filed a mandatory report within 2 hours. Ryan's timeline is collapsing traffic camera puts him at the house at 6:17 this morning. His own statement to Rawlins says 2 in the afternoon. The blood panel confirms Emily was dosed early in the day. Noah's jaw was set. The pieces are connecting themselves. They always do, I said, when the foundation is solid. Cedar Falls General was a 4-story brick building on the east side of town. Noah pulled in, and I was out of the truck before it fully stopped moving, the way I had moved through 100 hospital corridors, fast and quiet, with purpose and without performance. Dr. Megan Foster met me in the hallway outside room 214. 41 years old, dark-haired, with the composed manner of an emergency physician who had learned to deliver difficult information without making the difficulty worse by the way she delivered it. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "your daughter has been asking for you since she became coherent enough to form complete sentences. She is physically stable, vitals normal. The sedative is metabolizing, no injuries requiring treatment. What she needs right now, more than anything I can provide, is you." My throat tightened so hard I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. "Can I see her?" "She's been waiting," Dr. Foster said and stepped aside. The room was small and white-lit with the flat fluorescence of hospital rooms everywhere. Emily was sitting up in the bed with a blanket pulled to her waist and a cup of water on the tray table. She looked smaller than she did in real life, the way people always look smaller in hospital beds, but her eyes when she found me in the doorway were her mother's eyes, warm and brown and completely present. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Emily said, "Dad," and her voice broke clean in half on the single syllable, and I crossed the room in 4 steps and went down on one knee beside the bed and took both her hands in mine and held on. She bent forward and pressed her forehead against our joined hands and started to cry. Not the quiet kind, but the full-body kind that comes when something held too tightly for too long finally finds a place to go. Her shoulders shook. Her breath came in uneven pulls. I stayed exactly where I was on my knee on the hospital floor, because that was where I needed to be. "I've got you," I said, and my voice was not steady, but I did not try to make it steady. "I'm here, Emily. I've got you." "I was so scared," she said, muffled and wet. "I couldn't make my body work right, and I kept thinking, where is my dad? Where is he?" My eyes burned. "I heard you," I said. "I was a long way away, and I heard you and I came." When the worst of it had passed and her breathing evened out, she pulled back enough to look at me. Her face was blotched, her eyes swollen. She looked exactly as she had at 7 years old, waking from a nightmare, raw and real, and reaching for something solid. "Ryan did this," she said. Not a question. I met her eyes. "Yes." She absorbed that. I watched her face move through something, not surprise, because I think some part of her had already known, but the specific grief of a confirmation. The moment when what you feared becomes what you know. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough," I said. "Too long. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner." She shook her head. "You were protecting me." "I was trying to." She looked down at our joined hands, then back up. Her jaw had set in the way it set when Emily Whitmore had made a decision and intended to stand by it, a look I had first seen at age 9, when she decided to learn to ride a bicycle without training wheels and fell off 11 times without crying. "Tell me everything," she said. "All of it. From the beginning." I looked at her, at the steadiness returning to her face, the set of her jaw, the eyes that were her mother's, but the resolve entirely her own. "Everything," I said. "But first, are you warm enough? Do you need water?" She almost laughed. "Almost. Dad." "Okay," I said, and I began. I talked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I have given briefings in front of generals. I have delivered news to families in hospital corridors that no family should ever receive. In 31 years, I have had to say a great many hard things to a great many people. Nothing was as hard as this. I started at the beginning, the way Emily appeared in Victor Langston's research, before she ever appeared in Ryan's life. The car on Ridgeway Drive in April. Daniel. Gloria's history with Victor's company. The recordings from August. The insurance policy with the LLC beneficiary. The power of attorney she had signed on a morning she was running late for work. I told her everything. I had promised her everything, and I kept that promise. Emily did not interrupt. She listened fully, her hands folded in her lap, eyes on my face. I could see each piece of information landing and changing something in her expression, not dramatically, not all at once. The way water changes the shape of stone slowly, and then all at once when enough has been worn away. When I told her Victor had identified her father's assets and engineered a meeting between Ryan and Emily at a charity event 5 years ago, her face went very still. "He didn't find me," she said. Her voice was flat in a way I had never heard from her before. "Ryan didn't find me. He was sent." "Yes," I said. She turned and looked at the window. The hospital room overlooked the parking lot, the lights out there, the particular amber of nighttime parking lots, warm-colored and cold in their warmth. Emily looked at those lights for a long moment. 5 years, she said. Not to me, to the window. I made him coffee every morning. I learned how he liked his eggs. I cried at our wedding because I was happy. Her voice cracked once on the last word, and she pressed her lips together hard. I was actually happy, Dad. I know you were, I said. My chest ached with it. Was any of it honest, any part of it? I thought about how to answer carefully. I think you were honest, I said. Everything you brought to that marriage came from a sincere place. What he brought, I can't tell you what was inside him. I only know what he did. She nodded once, slowly filing it away in a place she would deal with later when she had more room. The insurance policy, she said. Victor gets the money. If something happened to you, yes. Her hands tightened in her lap until her knuckles showed white. He was going to... We don't know the full extent of what they intended, I said. What we know is the arrangement exists. Rollins knows it exists. Sarah knows it. And it is being investigated. She looked at me steadily. How long have you known about all of this? The full picture since August, the first signs since April. Something moved across her face that I could not entirely read. Not anger exactly, but something adjacent to it. You should have told me, she said. Yes, I said. I should have. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid that if you knew you would confront Ryan, and if Ryan knew we were watching, he would have covered his tracks, and we would have lost everything we had built. I held her gaze. It was a strategic decision. It was also a decision that cost you months of living with someone who was planning to hurt you while your father knew and said nothing. I would make the same decision again to protect the case. and I will spend a long time being sorry about what that cost you." Emily looked at me for a long moment. Then, "The papers I signed, the power of attorney. Sarah is already working on voiding it. Your signature was obtained under false pretenses. The forensic analysis of your handwriting confirms your motor control at the time of signing was consistent with sedative impairment. The document is almost certainly invalid from the moment it was signed." Emily closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted. "How what about the house? Ryan's lawyer is going to come after it." And here was the moment I had been carrying for 3 years, waiting for the right time. Not knowing the right time would be a hospital room on a Friday night in October. "Emily," I said, "I need to tell you something about the house. Something I did 3 years ago sitting with Robert Haynes going through your mother's estate." She waited. I told her about the trust. The irrevocable structure, Emily as sole beneficiary. And the condition, if she ever married someone convicted of a felony, the property transferred to the National Rescue Foundation. She stared at me. "Ryan has never had any legal claim to that house," I said. "Not from the day he married you. Not for a single day of your marriage. He spent 5 years building a plan to take something that was never legally available for him to take." Emily started to laugh. Not the bright laugh of happiness, but the incredulous, releasing laugh of someone who has just understood the full absurdity of a situation. 4 seconds then, it turned into crying again, lighter than before, the way rain is lighter when the worst of the storm has already passed. "Mom," she said when she could speak. "Mom would have loved this." My eyes burned. She would have been insufferably pleased about it. I agreed. Emily took my hand. Her grip was strong, stronger than I expected from someone who had been through what she had been through that day. Then she said, "Dad, who sent you that warning last night?" "I'm not certain yet." "But you have a thought." "I have a thought. But I want to be sure before I say it out loud." She nodded slowly, then quietly. "Whoever it was, they took a real risk." "They did," I said. "I hope they're okay." I looked at my daughter, her mother's eyes, her own jaw, the hand holding mine, with the grip of someone who had been through something terrible and come out the other side still fundamentally herself, and I thought, whatever comes next, this part is already won. "So do I," I said. I was not in the room when Ashley Carter told the truth. I was at the hospital where Emily had finally fallen asleep, around 2 in the morning with my jacket draped over her blanket, because the room was cold, and I had not wanted to leave to find a nurse. I sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her breathe and thought about nothing in particular, which was the first time in 6 months I had been able to do that. Rollins called me at 9:47 the next morning. By then, Emily was awake and eating hospital oatmeal with the focused determination of someone who had decided that getting stronger was the only item on her agenda. "Ashley Carter came in at 8:30, Rollins said. "Voluntarily. No attorney initially. She said she needed to talk to someone and she did not want to talk to anyone in her family." I looked at Emily across the room. She was watching me, oatmeal spoon halfway to her mouth, reading my face. "What did she say?" I asked. "I'd rather walk you through it in person," Rollins said. "But Harold, she came in shaking so hard she could barely sign the visitor log. Whatever she's carrying, she's been carrying it alone." I drove to the Cedar Falls Police Department at 10:30 after Noah arrived at the hospital to sit with Emily. The department was a single-story brick building on Franklin Street, functional, and unadorned, with a parking lot that was half full on a Saturday morning. Rollins met me in the hallway outside his office, a compact man of 50 with close-cropped gray hair and the patient eyes of someone who had spent decades listening to people and had learned to hear what they were not saying as clearly as what they were. "She asked for you," he said. "After she finished talking to me, she asked if she could speak with you directly." I told her that was your decision. How is she? Rollins considered that. She cried for about 20 minutes straight before she could form a coherent sentence. After that, she was precise, like someone who had rehearsed what they wanted to say and was relieved to finally say it. Ashley Carter was sitting in a small interview room at the end of the hall. She was 29 years old, dark-haired like her brother, with the particular hollowed-out look of someone who had not slept. When I came through the door, she looked up, and her eyes went immediately red. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, and her voice cracked on the second word. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened to Emily." I sat down across from her. I kept my voice level. "Tell me what you can tell me." She pressed her hands flat on the table, steadying herself, and began. She had known about the plan for 3 months. Gloria had brought her in gradually, the way you bring someone into something they would refuse if they saw it all at once, first as a confidant, then as a participant, then as someone who knew too much to walk away cleanly. By the time Ashley understood the full scope of what was being planned, Gloria had leverage over her, a gambling debt Ashley had kept hidden from the family money borrowed from Ryan 2 years earlier, that Gloria had quietly taken over and now held like a promissory note. She told me if I didn't help, she'd tell Ryan about the debt. Ashley said, her voice thin and steady with the steadiness of someone reading from a very painful document, and that Ryan would cut me off. She said families stick together, and this was what sticking together looked like. She had played her role on Friday. She had stood in that driveway and said the words on the paper Gloria had given her. But the night before Thursday night, after Gloria confirmed the plan was happening the next day, something had broken open in her. "I kept thinking about Emily," Ashley said, and her jaw tightened. "She was never anything but kind to me. She made me birthday cards, actual cards with handwriting in them, not just a text. And I was going to stand in her driveway and say those things about her father." She pressed her lips together hard. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you, about the fact that you were going to be on a plane and you wouldn't know. So you bought a prepaid phone," I said. She looked up. "You knew it was me." "I suspected," I said. "I didn't know for certain until right now." She exhaled a long, shaking breath. "I bought it at the pharmacy on Route 9 at 11:30 at night. I didn't know what to say, so I just 5 words. I thought 5 words were enough to warn you without, I don't know, without making it worse somehow." She looked at the table. "I still showed up the next day. I still did it. The warning didn't stop me from doing it." "No," I said. "But it gave me enough time to prepare, which is why we have what we have now." She looked up at me and her eyes were wet and raw and searching. "Is Emily going to be okay?" "She's eating hospital oatmeal and making plans," I said. "She's going to be fine." Something in Ashley's face broke and then rebuilt itself in the space of a few seconds. She nodded, pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment, and then straightened. I want to cooperate fully," she said. "I already told Detective Rollins everything, the planning meetings, what Gloria told me to say, the script she wrote. All of it." She swallowed. "I know I'm going to face consequences. I know what I did. But I need it to be on the record that I was coerced, and I need it to be on the record that I tried to warn you." "And it will be," I said. And then, because it was the truth, and she had earned the truth, "What you did Thursday night mattered, Ashley. It mattered more than you know." Her eyes filled and spilled over, and she did not try to stop it. She sat there crying with her hands flat on the table, not hiding, not performing, just a 29-year-old woman finally putting down something that had been crushing her for 3 months. After a few seconds, she wiped her face with both palms and looked at me directly. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "I have one more thing. Something I didn't tell Rollins yet because I wasn't sure if it was relevant." She took a breath. "The psychologist Victor hired to evaluate you. I was in the room when Victor called him. I heard the conversation. Victor told him exactly what conclusion to reach before the man had ever met you." She met my eyes. "I remember his name." I leaned forward slightly. "Tell Rollins," I said. "Tell him everything in order, starting with the name." She nodded. Her jaw was set now, the set of someone who had made a decision they intended to keep. I stood up to leave. At the door, I stopped. "Ashley." She looked up. "The debt Gloria was holding over you, how much?" she told me. It was not a small number, but it was not an insurmountable one. "Talk to Sarah Collins," I said. "My attorney. Tell her I sent you." She stared at me. "Why would you?" "Because you made one right choice in a situation where everything was pushing you toward the wrong one," I said. "That counts for something." I left her sitting there, still staring at the door after I had walked through it. In the hallway, Rollins was waiting. He raised an eyebrow. "She has more," I told him. "The psychologist's name. Go back in." He went. 4 weeks after that Friday in October, Ryan Carter walked into courtroom 3 of the Cedar Falls County Courthouse with a rolling storage cart and the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. I had spent those 4 weeks preparing. Sarah worked 18-hour days. Rollins coordinated with the county prosecutor. The forensic lab processed the blood panel results, the handwriting analysis on Emily's power of attorney, and the chain of custody for every piece of digital evidence we intended to present. Ashley had signed a cooperation agreement. Dr. Gerald Whitfield, the psychologist Victor had retained to evaluate me, had surrendered a written account of every instruction Victor had given him after receiving a review notice from the Virginia Board of Psychology. He had called Sarah's office within 48 hours. We were ready. Judge Patricia Okafor presided over courtroom 357 years old, a Cedar Falls native who had served on the bench for 14 years, patient with attorneys, and very short on patience with anyone she believed was wasting her time. Ryan's attorney, Douglas Fenn, from a civil litigation firm in Richmond, described the storage cart's contents as 312 pages of documented evidence. He set the box on the table with the care of a man handling something valuable. I sat beside Sarah at the respondent's table. In front of me was a yellow legal pad I did not write on, and a small external hard drive, matte black, no larger than a deck of cards, which I placed on the table when I sat down. Ryan glanced at it from across the aisle. Then he looked away. Fenn was good. He laid out the narrative with practiced confidence. Harold Whitmore, he told the court, was a man whose history of high-stress operational work had left him with documented difficulties managing emotional responses. Emily Carter had on multiple occasions expressed concern to her husband about her father's erratic behavior. The petition sought a protective evaluation and a temporary order restricting Harold's contact with Emily pending that evaluation. He cited page numbers. He spoke for 18 minutes without notes. When he finished, Judge Okafor looked at Sarah. "Ms. Collins." Sarah stood. She was wearing a dark blazer and the expression she wore when she was about to do something that could not be undone. "Your Honor," she said, "the respondent does not dispute that Mr. Carter has assembled a significant volume of documentation. We would like to offer the court an alternative record of the events in question." She picked up the hard drive and held it up briefly. 7 cameras, continuous timestamp, cloud-backed with chain of custody documentation for each source. She set it down. We would also like to draw the court's attention to audio recorded in the home of Gloria Carter on the 14th of August of this year. Fenn was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. Foundation. Ms. Collins, Judge Okafor said, "Can you establish the foundation for this recording?" "I can, Your Honor." Sarah was already reaching for the folder. The recording was made in a non-private service area of the residence entered with the full knowledge and consent of the homeowner. Virginia is a one-party consent state for audio recording. The individual placing the recording device was present in the space with the homeowner's invitation. We have documentation of the consent to enter the nature of the space and the chain of custody for the recording itself. She set the folder on the judge's bench. I am prepared to walk the court through each element. Judge Okafor read for 90 seconds. Then she looked up at Fenn. Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Collins. Gloria's voice came through the courtroom speakers, unhurried, precise, walking through each step of the plan, the way she had walked through it in her own sitting room 6 weeks earlier. The courtroom went very still, not the polite stillness of people listening, the specific stillness of people who have stopped everything else because what they are hearing demands their full attention. When Gloria's voice said, "We've been documenting his behavior for weeks, officer, we have it all on video." And then Rollins's body cam footage showed Gloria saying those exact words to his camera on the afternoon of the incident, Judge Okafor's expression did not change. But something in the set of her shoulders shifted with the quiet precision of a judge who has just heard something that has permanently altered the shape of the proceeding. Sarah played 37 seconds of Jake Hernandez's drone footage, enhanced, stabilized the handwritten script in Gloria's hands, legible in 3 lines of block printing. She played the traffic camera footage showing Ryan's silver Tahoe at 6:17 in the morning. She played Ashley's recorded statement. She presented Dr. Foster's blood panel report, the forensic handwriting analysis, and the Google Photos chain of custody documentation. Ryan sat very still through all of it. I watched him. Not with satisfaction, I want to be honest about that. What I felt was exhaustion. The particular tiredness of someone who has been braced for a very long time and is finally slowly beginning to unclench. Fenn requested a recess. The judge granted 15 minutes. Ryan asked to speak with his attorney privately. I know what happened in that room because Ryan told Rollins 6 days later as part of his cooperation agreement. Fenn laid out what Sarah had just presented piece by piece, then asked Ryan a single question. Is there anything in that record that is inaccurate? Ryan looked at his attorney for a long moment. Then he said 4 words that ended the civil petition and opened the criminal one. Victor lied to me. The recess lasted 15 minutes. Ryan came back into the courtroom and sat down and did not look at anyone. His attorney Fenn requested a sidebar with Judge Okafor. They spoke in low voices at the bench for 4 minutes. When Fenn returned to the table, he leaned down to Ryan, said something in his ear, and Ryan nodded once, a small, defeated movement, the nod of a man who has run out of directions to run. Then Ryan Carter asked to speak with the prosecutor. I sat at the respondent's table and watched this happen, and felt nothing dramatic. No surge of vindication. No heat behind the ribs. What I felt was the particular steadiness that comes at the end of something long and difficult when the outcome has finally caught up with the preparation. I had been braced for so many months that the unbracings came slowly in increments, like a fist opening finger by finger. Sarah leaned over and said quietly, "He's going to cooperate." "I know," I said. The formal cooperation session happened in a conference room down the hall with the county prosecutor and a court reporter present. I was not in the room. What I know of it comes from the prosecutor's summary from Sarah's notes and from what Rollins told me 3 days later over coffee in his office. Ryan talked for 2 hours and 19 minutes. He started at the beginning, with Victor Langston's first approach 5 years earlier, when Ryan had been carrying significant business debt, and Victor had presented himself as a potential investor and then gradually as something else entirely. He described the plan as Victor had laid it out to him: use Emily's assets to secure Victor's capital position, use Harold's reputation to neutralize any interference, use Gloria and Ashley to provide witnesses and documentation. And then he said the thing that changed the shape of everything, the thing I had suspected, but had not been able to prove until Ryan said it with a court reporter in the room. Victor told me we'd split the assets 50-50 after the dust settled, Ryan said. He had a contract. He showed it to me 3 years ago. My name was on it. The prosecutor asked him to describe the contract. It was a private agreement, Ryan said, signed by both of us. Victor kept the original. A pause. Last month, Sarah Collins showed me a contract Victor filed with one of his investment partners. My name wasn't in it. The split was different. The whole structure was different. His voice had gone flat in the way voices go flat when anger has burned through itself and left something colder behind. He was never going to give me half. I was the fall guy from the beginning. Sarah called me while I was sitting in the courthouse parking lot waiting. He gave us the hacker, she said. Name, location, the specific company email account used to access your camera system. The hacker was working from inside Ryan's construction company offices, Ryan's own IT infrastructure. She paused. That's obstruction of justice added to the list. Ryan's attorney is negotiating the cooperation terms right now. And Victor, I asked. Daniel called 10 minutes ago. My hand tightened on the phone. Daniel Marsh had been standing near Gate C-17 at Dulles International Airport since noon. He had a description, 3 photographs, and 6 years of surveillance experience. Victor Langston arrived at the gate at 4:47 in the afternoon, pulling a carry-on and moving with the particular focused ease of a man who believed he had a plane to catch and a problem to leave behind. Daniel had made one call to the FBI field office contact that Rollins had arranged 2 weeks earlier when the wire fraud and interstate conspiracy elements of the case had expanded the jurisdiction beyond local law enforcement. 2 agents were already at the terminal. They had the arrest warrant signed that morning by a federal magistrate based on the cumulative evidence package Sarah had submitted. Victor was cuffed at the gate before the boarding call. Daniel told me later that Victor had said nothing when the agents identified themselves. He had set his carry-on down, extended his wrists, and looked at the gate agent with the expression of a man calculating whether there was still a move available to him. There was not. He didn't fight it, Daniel said. He just went very still and very quiet, like a machine that had run out of input. Twist TT2 came out in the federal discovery process. 3 weeks later, the prior pattern evidence that established Victor had run the same scheme in 2 other states over the previous 5 years, always targeting families with elderly parents holding significant property, always using a combination of a willing spouse and fabricated documentation, always disappearing before the cases could be consolidated. Cedar Falls was the third. It was the first time anyone had been ready for him. I sat in the parking lot of the courthouse for a long time after Sarah's call. The October light had gone gold and low, the way it does in Virginia in the late afternoon, when the angle of the sun makes everything look like it is being remembered rather than happening. I thought about 5 years of someone else's planning laid against 6 months of mine. I thought about the family trust signed on a Tuesday afternoon in 2021 that Ryan had spent years scheming to circumvent. I thought about Ashley buying a prepaid phone at 11:30 at night and typing 5 words she was not sure anyone would act on. Noah called at 5:22. "Victor's in federal custody," he said. "It's done." I pressed my hand flat against the steering wheel, exhaled once, long and slow. "How's Emily?" I asked. "She called me 20 minutes ago," Noah said, and his voice carried something warm in it. "She wanted to know if you were okay." My eyes went hot. My throat tightened. "Tell her I'm on my way," I said. I started the car. I pulled out of the courthouse parking lot, and I drove back toward the hospital through the gold October afternoon toward my daughter, who had asked if I was okay before she asked about anything else, because that was who she had always been and who she still was, despite everything they had tried to take from her. Some things, it turns out, cannot be taken. Justice in the American legal system does not arrive like a wave. It arrives like water, finding its level slowly through cracks and channels until everything displaced is finally irreversibly back where it belongs. The process took 4 months. Ryan Carter cooperated. He pleaded guilty to domestic violence conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and attempted financial exploitation. The judge noted that cooperation did not erase culpability, it only clarified it. Ryan had not been coerced. He had been a willing architect who became a casualty of his own plan. He received 42 months. Gloria did not cooperate. She fought, and the August recording and 47 recovered videos fought back. The jury deliberated 6 hours, 8 years, minimum 5 before parole eligibility. Before announcing the sentence, the judge paused at the line in the transcript where Gloria's voice said, "We've been documenting it." He looked up. He looked at her. Then he said, "Indeed you have." I was in the courtroom. I will not pretend I felt nothing. Ashley received 18 months probation, mandatory counseling, and 200 hours of community service. Her cooperation had been genuine and early. She sat in the back of the courtroom when Gloria was sentenced and did not look at her mother once. Victor Langston pleaded to federal wire fraud conspiracy and attempted financial exploitation across 3 jurisdictions. 12 years, no parole eligibility for 8. His Marina District project collapsed before sentencing. The city council found urgent reasons to revisit every permit bearing his name. His name, which he had spent considerable money making prominent, now appeared primarily in court documents. James Langston surrendered his notary credentials and faced criminal fraud charges in 2 states. His cooperation produced records that supported the voiding of every document he had certified. Emily filed for divorce in November. The power of attorney was voided by court order. The marital asset review found the house on Ridgeway Drive held by an irrevocable family trust, not a marital asset, not subject to division, entirely beyond reach. Ryan's attorney filed a motion to challenge the trust. Judge Okafor dismissed it in 11 pages that Sarah called among the most thorough dismissals she had read in 14 years of practice. Ryan Carter had spent 5 years building a plan to take a house that had never for a single day of his marriage to Emily been legally available for him to take. It was the kind of ending that would have made Margaret laugh until she had to sit down. Harold was fully exonerated. The fabricated documentation became exhibit after exhibit in the cases against Ryan, Gloria, and Victor. Dr. Whitfield surrendered his license before the Virginia Board of Psychology could take it. When Sarah read me his written statement over the phone, I did not feel vindicated. I felt tired in the specific way that comes at the end of something that should never have needed to happen. In early March, I drove to the hospital to pick up Emily for the last time. The roses along the back fence were showing their early buds. She had called one evening and said simply, "Dad, I think I'm ready to go home." She was waiting in the lobby with a bag over one shoulder, wearing the expression she got when she had made a decision and was at peace with it. She hugged me at the door, long and full, the kind that is simply what it is. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready?" she said. We drove with the windows down one of those early March days that cannot decide if it is still winter or already something else. Emily looked out the window the whole way, the diner on Route 7, the courthouse, the school where she taught, the corner pharmacy. I pulled into the driveway. She stood on the brick path and looked at the house for a long moment. "It's still here," she said. "It was always going to be," I said. I had replaced the camera system the week before. Wider coverage, cleaner resolution, the blind spot finally eliminated. Painted the exact color of the trim, same as always. Emily noticed immediately. "You changed the cameras." "Better system," I said. "Same principle." She looked at the unit above the door, then at me, and something moved through her face, not quite a smile, not one. "Dad," she said, taking my arm. "You are the most prepared person I have ever known." I looked at her. Her mother's eyes, her own jaw, the hand holding my arm with the grip of someone who had come through something real and arrived intact, and felt something I have no precise word for. Something between gratitude and grief and relief and an ordinary morning in a life that is finally what it is supposed to be. "I spent 31 years getting here," I said. "I wasn't going to stop being careful just because I retired." She laughed, real and full and unguarded. She pulled the front door open and walked inside. I stood on the porch one moment longer. The camera above the door. The rose bushes along the fence. The quiet street and the oak tree and the particular ordinary beauty of a Friday morning in Cedar Falls, Virginia. Then I followed my daughter inside. People ask me if this is a revenge story. I tell them it is not. Revenge stories are about what you take back. This is about what I refused to lose: my daughter, my home, my name, and the belief that God places the right people in the right place at the right moment if you are paying attention. I was paying attention. That is the only thing I did differently from anyone else in a family revenge story, whoever sat helpless while someone they loved was hurt. Here is what I want you to take from Harold Whitmore's story. Do not wait for the crisis to prepare. The cloud backup, the second camera, the attorney, the trust, none of that happened on the day everything fell apart. It happened in the quiet months before, when I had nothing but a feeling and a notepad, and God giving me enough time to think. Do not become the monster they describe. Ryan and Gloria needed me to break a door, to make a threat, to hand them the story they had written for me. I did not give it to them. That discipline, not spite, not strategy, just discipline, is what convicted the real criminals. And do not underestimate the quiet people in your life. God gives us warning signs. God gives us Noahs and Ashleys and 11-year-old boys with drones. The question is whether we are still enough to see them. If this family revenge story moved something in, you leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you believe God puts the right stories in front of us for a reason, subscribe so you never miss the next one. I will see you there.